The studio lights burned bright, casting sharp shadows across the polished floor of the late show set. Stephen Colbert leaned forward in his chair, his trademark grin flickering with a hint of unease. Across from him, Blake Shelton sat with his arms crossed, his cowboy hat tilted slightly back, revealing a furrowed brow. The audience, packed into the Ed Sullivan Theater, buzzed with anticipation, their murmurs barely audible over the hum of the stage equipment. It was supposed to be a standard late-night interview, a promotional stop for Blake's latest album, but the air felt charged, like the calm before a storm. Stephen, ever the showman, started with his usual playful jabs. "So, Blake, you're out here singing about pickup trucks and whiskey, but I hear you've gone soft, trading honky-tanks for Hollywood. What's the deal?" The audience chuckled, expecting Blake to fire back with his easygoing charm. But Blake's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing just enough to hint at irritation. "I don't know, Stephen," he said, his Oklahoma drawl slow and deliberate. "Maybe I'm just tired of folks like you thinking they've got me figured out." The crowd's laughter faltered, sensing the edge in his voice. Stephen, quick to recover, leaned back, adjusting his glasses. "Whoa, easy there, cowboy. I'm just saying, you're a long way from the dirt roads now." He waved a hand, gesturing to the sleek set, the city skyline glowing through the backdrop. Blake didn't smile. Instead, he leaned forward, his boots scuffing the floor. "You think you're real clever, don't you? Sitting up here in your suit, poking fun at folks who don't live in your world." The audience shifted, a ripple of discomfort passing through the seats. Stephen's grin held, but his eyes darted to the side, where his producer stood off stage, giving a subtle nod to keep going. "Come on, Blake," Stephen said, his tone light but probing. "You're a big star now, rubbing elbows with the elite. You're telling me you don't enjoy the glitz?" Blake's fingers tapped the armrest, his voice low but firm. "I think sing about what I know, Stephen, my life, my people. You wouldn't last a day where I come from." The exchange was sharper than the usual late-night banter, and the crowd sensed it. Stephen, never one to shy away from a challenge, pivoted to a hotter topic. "All right, let's talk about something else. You've been vocal about your views on, let's say, certain cultural shifts. Care to elaborate?" He raised an eyebrow, inviting Blake to step into the trap. The question wasn't about music anymore. It was about the headlines, the online debates, the things Blake had said in interviews that had sparked firestorms on social media. Blake's eyes locked onto Stephen's, and for a moment, the studio felt impossibly small. "You want to go there?" he asked, his voice steady but carrying a weight that made the audience lean in. "Fine, I'll say it. I think people are too quick to judge what they don't understand, and I'm not here to apologize for who I am." The crowd erupted, some cheering, others murmuring in dissent. Stephen seized the moment, his voice rising with a mix of humor and challenge. "So, what? You're the voice of the heartland now. The guy who's gonna tell us city folks how to think." Blake's chair scraped back an inch, his posture stiffening. "I'm not telling anyone how to think, Stephen. I'm saying you don't get to twist my words to fit your narrative." The tension was palpable now, the kind that makes producers sweat and audiences hold their breath. Stephen, sensing the moment slipping, tried to pivot back to levity. All right, let's cool it down. Tell us about the new album, Blake. What's the story behind it?" But Blake wasn't having it. He leaned back, his arms still crossed, and shook his head. "You don't care about the album, Stephen. You're just looking for a soundbite, something to clip and send viral." The accusation hung in the air, raw and unfiltered. The audience gasped, a few clapped, and Stephen's smile faltered for the first time. Offstage, the producer's hand froze mid-signal, unsure whether to cut to commercial or let the train wreck unfold. The stage lights seemed to burn hotter as the silence stretched, broken only by the faint hum of the audience's unease. Stephen Colbert, caught off guard by Blake Shelton's accusation, regained his composure, his fingers drumming lightly. On the desk, he tilted his head, the grin returning but sharper now, like a blade wrapped in velvet. "A soundbite, huh? Come on, Blake, you're in showbiz. You know how this works. You say something spicy, it gets clicks. That's the game." His tone was playful, but the challenge was clear, daring Blake to double down. Blake's eyes didn't waver, his voice low and steady, cutting through the studio's artificial warmth. "Maybe I'm tired of the game, Stephen. Maybe I'm done with people like you turning everything I say into a circus." The crowd stirred, a mix of cheers and murmurs rippling through the seats. Some were on Blake's side, drawn to his defiance. Others sensed a spectacle, their phones already out, ready to capture whatever came next. The producer, still off stage, gestured frantically to the crew, signaling to hold the cameras steady. Stephen leaned forward, his hands clasped, his voice taking on a mock-serious tone. "A circus, Blake. You're on a late-night show, not a soapbox. We're here to have fun, talk about your music, maybe poke a little fun at that cowboy hat." The audience laughed, but it was thinner now, nervous. Blake's jaw clenched, his fingers gripping the armrests. You keep going for the hat, Steven, but you're not fooling anyone. You want to talk about my music? Then talk about it. Stop trying to bait me into your culture war nonsense. The crowd gasped, the air electric with the weight of Blake's words. Steven's eyebrows shot up, but he didn't miss a beat. Culture war. Whoa, Blake, I'm just asking questions. You're the one getting heated. He turned to the audience. Palms up, playing the innocent host. Folks, is it just me, or is Blake bringing some Oklahoma thunder tonight? The crowd roared, some clapping, others shouting encouragement, but the divide was clear. The room split between those rooting for Blake's raw honesty and those craving the drama of a late-night takedown. Blake shifted in his seat, his boots scuffing the floor again, the sound amplified by the mic clipped to his jacket. You know what, Steven? I came here to talk about my work, my songs, the stuff that matters to me. But you can't help yourself. You've got to turn it into a fight. Make me the bad guy for clicks. His voice was calm but carried a steel edge, the kind that comes from a man who's had enough. The audience quieted, sensing the shift. This wasn't banter anymore. It was personal. Steven, ever the professional, sensed the line but couldn't resist pushing just a bit further. All right, Blake, let's talk music then. Your new album's got that classic country vibe, but some folks say it's leaning into, let's say, divisive themes. Care to clear that up? The question was a trap, dressed up as an olive branch, and Blake knew it. He leaned back, his hat casting a shadow over his eyes. Divisive. That's your word, not mine. I write about life, Steven. Love, loss, hard work, family. If that's divisive to you, maybe you're the one with the problem. The crowd erupted again, louder this time, a mix of cheers and boos. Steven's grin tightened, his eyes flicking to the producer, who was now pacing nervously off stage. Okay, Steven said, raising his hands to calm the room. Let's take a step back. Blake, you're passionate. I get it. Let's talk about something lighter. Tell us about working with your band. Any fun stories from the studio? It was a clear pivot, an attempt to steer the conversation back to safe ground. But Blake's expression didn't soften. He leaned forward, his voice quieter now, almost dangerous. You don't get it, do you? I'm not here to play nice for your ratings. You want a story? Here's one. I'm sick of being a prop for your jokes. The audience held its breath, the tension so thick it felt like the room might crack. Steven opened his mouth to respond, but Blake wasn't done. His words cutting through the silence like a knife, setting the stage for what would come next. Blake Shelton's words hung in the air, sharp and unyielding, slicing through the polished veneer of the late-night set. The audience, caught in a strange limbo between shock and fascination, stayed silent, their eyes darting between Blake and Stephen Colbert. Steven's fingers twitched on the desk, his usual quick wit momentarily stalled. He tilted his head, forcing a chuckle to break the tension. A prop, Blake. Come on, you're a superstar. Nobody's using you. We're just having a conversation here. His voice was smooth, but the strain was evident, like a man trying to defuse a bomb with a smile. Blake didn't budge, his posture rigid, his gaze locked on Steven. A conversation? That's what you call this? You keep twisting everything I say, trying to make me look like some backward fool for your audience to laugh at. His voice was low, deliberate, each word landing like a stone. The crowd stirred, some nodding in agreement, others whispering to their neighbors, unsure whether to applaud or stay quiet. The producer, now visibly sweating off stage, signaled to the band to be ready, a subtle hint that a commercial break might be needed to cool things down. Steven leaned back, his hands spreading wide in a gesture of mock surrender. Twisting Blake, I'm just asking what everyone's thinking. You've got a platform, you make bold statements, people react. That's how it works. He turned to the audience, his grin returning, seeking their support. Right, folks? We're just keeping it real here. The crowd gave a mixed response, some clapping, others murmuring, the divide in the room growing sharper. Blake's eyes narrowed, his patience visibly fraying. Keeping it real. You're playing to the room, Steven. You don't care about what I'm saying, you just want the clip that'll trend by morning. The accusation hit hard, and Steven's smile faltered for a split second. He adjusted his tie, a nervous tick, before leaning forward. All right, let's slow this down. You're saying I'm not listening, so, tell me, Blake, what's the one thing you want us to know about you? Your music? Your world? No spin, no jokes, just you. It was a rare moment of sincerity from Steven, an attempt to bridge the gap, but the audience could feel the undercurrent, the unspoken challenge still lingering. Blake took a deep breath, his fingers loosening their grip on the armrests. I want people to know I'm real. My songs, my life. It's not some act. I sing about the people I grew up with, the places I've been, the things I've seen, and I'm not going to sit here and let you turn that into a punchline to make yourself look clever. His voice was steady, but there was a rawness to it, a glimpse of the man behind the celebrity. The audience leaned in, some nodding, others clutching their phones, recording every word. Steven nodded slowly, his expression softening. but he couldn't resist a small jab. That's fair, Blake, but you've got to admit, you make it easy. Sometimes, wading into hot topics like you're ready for a bar fight. The crowd laughed, but it was uneasy. Sensing the tightrope they were all walking, Blake's face hardened again, his voice dropping to a near growl. You just can't help yourself, can you? I'm trying to give you a straight answer, and you're still looking for the zinger. The room felt like it was holding its breath, the energy teetering on the edge of chaos. Stephen, sensing the moment slipping further, tried to pivot again. Okay, let's talk about something we can all agree on. Your voice, Blake. That's what carries your songs. Tell us about finding that sound. What makes it yours? He leaned forward, his tone earnest, but Blake wasn't buying it. He shook his head, a bitter smile tugging at his lips. You're good, Stephen, real good, but I'm not here to play your game anymore. The audience gasped, a few cheers breaking through the tension. Blake's chair scraped back slightly, his body language screaming that he was done. Stephen's eyes widened, his hands rising to calm the room. But Blake's next move was already in motion, the weight of his words and actions about to shift the night into something unforgettable. Blake Shelton's bitter smile lingered, his chair still pushed back, his body coiled like a spring ready to snap. The studio lights caught the glint in his eyes, a mix of defiance and exhaustion, as the audience held its collective breath. Stephen Colbert, sensing the moment teetering toward disaster, leaned forward, his hands raised in a placating gesture. Whoa, Blake, let's not get hasty, he said, his voice a careful blend of humor and caution. We're just talking here. No games, just two guys trying to understand each other. The crowd murmured, some leaning forward, others clutching their phones. Capturing every second of the unfolding drama, Blake's gaze didn't soften. He tilted his head, his cowboy hat casting a shadow across his face. Understand each other. That's rich. Stephen, you've been poking at me since I sat down, trying to get a rise, and now you want to act like we're buddies. His voice was steady, but the edge was unmistakable, each word laced with a frustration that felt deeply personal. The audience split further, some cheering his bluntness, others shifting uncomfortably. Sensing the interview spiraling beyond the usual late-night script, Stephen's grin tightened, his fingers tapping the desk as he tried to regain control. All right, I hear you. Maybe I pushed too hard. Let's reset. Talk about something you love. Your ranch, your life outside the spotlight. Give us a glimpse of the real Blake. It was a deft move, an attempt to pivot to safer ground, but Blake wasn't following. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his voice dropping to a near whisper that carried through the mic. You don't get it, do you? I've been giving you the real me this whole time, and you keep trying to make it something it's not. The crowd's reaction was visceral, a wave of gasps and scattered applause. The producer, now nearly frantic off stage, signaled to the crew to prepare for a break. But the cameras stayed locked on Blake, his intensity impossible to cut away from. Stephen, caught between his instincts as a host and the raw energy of the moment, tried to diffuse with humor. Okay Blake, you're preaching now. Should I pass the collection plate? The audience laughed, but it was thin, the tension too thick to break with a quip. Blake shook his head, his hands clenching into fists. That's exactly what I'm talking about. You can't take it seriously, can you? Everything's a joke to you, but this is my life. His voice rose slightly, the Oklahoma drawl thickening with emotion. I came here to talk about my music, my truth, and you've done nothing but try to spin it into some late-night circus for your audience to eat up. The crowd erupted, some shouting support, others booing. The room a chaotic mix of allegiance and spectacle. Stephen's eyes flicked to the producer, then back to Blake, his composure slipping. Blake, I'm not the enemy here. I'm just doing my job, asking questions, keeping it lively. You're the one turning this into a showdown. He spread his hands, appealing to the audience, but Blake cut him off, his voice sharp and unyielding. Your job is to make me look like a fool so you can get your laughs and your clicks. I'm done with it. The audience gasped, the air electric with the weight of Blake's words. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor, the sound echoing through the studio. The crowd went wild, some cheering, others shouting in disbelief, as Blake reached for the mic clipped to his jacket. Stephen's face froze, his hands half raised, caught between shock and a desperate need to salvage the moment. Blake, come on, sit down, let's talk this out, he said, his voice urgent. But Blake was already moving, his boots heavy on the stage, his intention clear. The producer signaled for a commercial break, but the cameras stayed rolling, capturing every step as Blake turned his back on Stephen, the audience, and the glittering set. The room was a cacophony of noise, cheers, and boos blending into a roar, as Blake's silhouette moved toward the stage's edge, leaving the host and the audience to grapple with what had just happened. Blake Shelton's boots echoed as he strode toward the edge of the stage, the spotlight trailing him like a reluctant shadow. The audience was a sea of noise, cheers clashing with boos, some standing to get a better view, others frozen in their seats, phones, raised to capture the moment. Stephen Colbert, still behind his desk, scrambled to his feet, his voice cracking through the chaos. "Blake, hold on, let's not do this," he called, his usual polish replaced by a raw urgency. But Blake didn't turn back, his silhouette stark against the glowing cityscape backdrop, his hand already tugging the mic wire free from his jacket. The producer, now a blur of motion off stage, waved frantically at the control booth, but the cameras stayed locked on Blake, the red lights blinking like unblinking eyes. The crowd's roar grew louder, a mix of encouragement and disbelief. As Blake tossed the mic onto the floor, the thud reverberating through the speakers. Stephen, his hands outstretched, took a step forward. "Come on, man, you don't walk off the Late Show," he said, forcing a laugh, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of panic, the realization that this wasn't just a moment, it was a spectacle that would define the night. Blake paused at the stage's edge, his back still to Stephen, his cowboy hat tilted low. He turned his head just enough for the audience to catch the glint in his eyes. "I'm not your prop, Stephen," he said, his voice low but carrying through the chaos, amplified by the discarded mic still picking up sound. "You want a show, you got one, but I'm done playing." The crowd exploded, some chanting his name, others shouting for him to stay. The room, a live wire of conflicting emotions. Stephen, now standing fully, gestured to the band, who struck up a quick, awkward chord to fill the void, but it did little to cut the tension. "Blake, you're killing me here," he said, his voice a mix of exasperation and charm, trying to pull the moment back from the brink. "Let's talk, just you and me, no cameras, no audience. What do you say?" It was a last-ditch effort, a plea dressed as a joke. But Blake's shoulders squared, his decision made. He stepped off the stage, disappearing into the wings, the curtain swaying slightly in his wake. The audience's roar reached a fever pitch, a chaotic blend of support and outrage, as the cameras panned back to Stephen, who stood alone under the lights, his grin gone, his hands dropping to his sides. The producer signaled for a commercial break and the screen finally cut to black. But not before catching Stephen's stunned expression, the weight of the moment sinking in. When the show returned, Stephen was back at his desk. The audience quieter now, still buzzing from what they'd witnessed. He adjusted his tie, forcing a smile, but his eyes were distant, processing. "Well, folks," he began, his voice steadier than before. "That was unexpected. Blake Shelton. Everybody, let's give him a hand for keeping it real." The crowd clapped, but it was uneven, some still reeling, others unsure how to react. Stephen leaned forward, his tone shifting to something more reflective. "You know, sometimes conversations get heated. And that's okay, it's what makes this show alive." Offstage, the production team was in a frenzy, phones ringing, messages flying as they scrambled to manage the fallout. Social media was already ablaze, clips of Blake's exit spreading like wildfire, hashtags trending, opinions splitting. Stephen, sensing the need to move on, transitioned to the next segment, introducing a comedian with a forced laugh, but the energy in the room felt off. The ghost of Blake's departure lingering. Meanwhile, in the green room, Blake sat alone, his hat on the table, his hands clasped tightly. A stagehand lingered nearby, unsure whether to approach, as Blake stared at the floor, his mind racing with the consequences of his choice, the weight of walking away from the spotlight in a way he never had before. The green room was dim, a stark contrast to the blazing lights of the Late Show stage. Blake Shelton sat on a worn leather couch, his cowboy hat resting on the table, its brim catching the faint glow of a nearby lamp. His hands, still clenched, loosened slightly as he exhaled, the silence heavy with the echo of his own words. The stagehand, hovering near the door, finally stepped forward, offering a bottle of water. Blake waved it off with a nod, his eyes fixed on the floor. Lost in thought, the distant hum of the audience filtered through the walls, a reminder of the chaos he'd left behind. On stage, Stephen Colbert pushed through the rest of the show, his voice steady but his energy strained, like a man navigating a minefield. The comedian he'd introduced was mid-set, landing jokes that drew polite laughs. But the audience's attention was elsewhere, their whispers and glances betraying their fixation on Blake's exit. Stephen, ever the professional, kept the show moving, but his glances toward the wings betrayed a lingering unease, the weight of the night's unraveling still fresh. Back in the green room, Blake's phone buzzed relentlessly on the table, notifications, piling up, messages from his team, friends, and even strangers reacting to the clips already flooding social media. He ignored it, running a hand through his hair, his mind replaying the moment he'd stood up, the mic hitting the floor, the crowd's roar. He'd meant every word, but now, in the quiet, doubt crept in. Had he gone too far? The stagehand, sensing his mood, hesitated before speaking. "They're talking about you out there," he said softly. "Big moment." Blake gave a tight smile, his voice low. "Yeah, not sure it's the kind I wanted." Meanwhile, Stephen wrapped the comedian's segment, transitioning to a musical guest with a forced grin. "Folks, we've had quite a night, but the show goes on," he said, his tone light but hollow. The audience clapped, but their energy was scattered, their minds still on the empty chair where Blake had sat. Offstage, the producer huddled with the team, already fielding calls from networks and outlets clamoring for details. The narrative was taking shape online. Blake Shelton, the country star, walking out on Stephen Colbert after a clash over identity, authenticity, and the media's game. In the green room, Blake finally picked up his phone, scrolling through the flood of messages. Some praised his stand, calling him a voice for those tired of being misunderstood. Others tore into him, labeling him oversensitive, a diva. He set the phone down, his jaw tight, and stood, grabbing his hat. The stagehand stepped back, sensing. "Is Shifty heading out?" he asked. Blake nodded, his voice steady but tired. "Yeah, I said what I needed to say." He adjusted his hat, his boots heavy on the floor, and walked toward the exit, the weight of his choice settling in. As the show closed, Stephen stood for his final monologue, the audience quieter than usual. "Well folks, tonight was real," he said, his smile softer now, reflective. "Sometimes you get more than you bargained for, and that's what makes this job wild. Thanks for being here." The crowd applauded, some standing, others still processing. The cameras cut, and Stephen lingered at his desk, staring at the spot where Blake had been, his mind turning over the night's events. Outside, Blake stepped into the cool night air, the city's hum a distant pulse compared to the storm he'd left inside. Paparazzi were already gathering, their flashes cutting through the dark, but he kept his head down, climbing into a waiting car. As it pulled away, the headlines were already writing themselves. The story of his walkout spreading far beyond the studio, a moment that would follow him, for better or worse, long after the lights dimmed.